They glowed in the dark, the Radium Girls. There is a photograph from 1920 that shows a group of young women at a company social gathering in New Jersey. They are smiling, dressed in their finest clothes, full of life and optimism. Third from the right stands Molly Magia. Within 2 years, she would be dead. Her jawbone crumbled to ash, her throat filled with blood, and she would not be alone. This is the story of the Radium Girls, women who were told they were painting with liquid sunshine, women who glowed when they walked into dark rooms, whose hair and dresses shimmered with an otherworldly light, women whose bones began to disintegrate while they were still alive, eaten from the inside by something they had been promised was harmless. This is a story about corporate greed, about the price of ignorance, and about courage in the face of unbearable suffering. The year is 1917. The United States has just entered World War I. Across the country, factories are mobilizing for the war effort, and among the most sought-after jobs for young women is dial painting at companies like the United States Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey, and later at Radium Dial Company in Ottawa, Illinois. These factories produce luminous watch faces and instrument dials for soldiers fighting in the darkness. The paint they use is called undark. It glows because it contains radium, an element discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie less than 20 years earlier. Radium is still mysterious, still associated with miracle cures. Doctors use it to treat cancer. Companies sell radium water as a health tonic, radium face creams, radium toothpaste. The public believes radium is not just safe, but beneficial. Liquid sunshine, they call it. For the young women hired to paint watch dials, the job is prestigious. It pays well, 3 times what most factory workers earn. The work is skilled, artistic, requiring a steady hand. The women who do this work are called ghost girls because the radium dust makes them glow in the dark. Some paint their fingernails with the luminous paints before going dancing. Some paint their teeth to make their smiles radiant. They have no reason to fear. The process is simple but exacting. Each woman sits with a small pot of radium paint, a fine camel hair brush, and hundreds of tiny watch dials. The brushes lose their shape quickly, becoming too broad to paint the delicate numbers, so the supervisors teach them a technique: lip, dip, paint. Point the brush with your lips, dip it in the radium paint, apply it to the dial. Over and over, hundreds of times a day. The women are told this is efficient. They are told the radium will simply pass through their systems. They are never told the truth. In the factories where radium is processed, the chemists and executives wear lead aprons. They use tongs and protective equipment. But in the dial painting studios, the young women have no protection. They touch the paint with their hands. They ingest it every time they point their brushes. At the end of each workday, they walk home glowing like ghosts. Molly Magia started working at the United States Radium Corporation young, known for her quick laugh and easy smile. By October 1921, she began experiencing pain in her jaw. A toothache, she thought. She saw Dr. Joseph Neff, an expert in unusual mouth conditions. What Dr. Neff saw troubled him. The tooth was extracted, but the wound did not heal. Instead, it became a painful ulcer. Another tooth had to be pulled. Then another. Each extraction left behind weeping sores that would not close. Molly's breath became foul. Speaking was agony. The pain spread to her limbs. A doctor diagnosed rheumatism and prescribed aspirin. Dr. Neff suspected something else. He had seen phosphorus poisoning in match factory workers, a condition called phossy jaw with similar symptoms. He asked Molly about her work. When she told him about the radium paint, his suspicions grew. He visited the factory but was told nothing. The company assured him radium was harmless. By May 1922, Molly had lost most of her teeth. Her entire lower jaw and the roof of her mouth had become one massive abscess. Dr. Neff attempted surgery. When he pulled back the skin to expose the bone, he found something horrifying. The bone was ashen gray. When he gently prodded it with his finger, the entire jawbone crumbled like cigarette ash in his hand. He did not need surgical tools. It simply broke apart at his touch. The radium had done this. Radium is chemically similar to calcium, so the body mistakes it for calcium and deposits it in the bones. Once there, it emits alpha radiation, invisible bullets that shoot through bone tissue, perforating cells, destroying collagen, turning solid bone into fragile honeycombed structures that collapse under the slightest pressure. Molly's jawbone had not been removed by surgery, it had simply disintegrated. Over the summer of 1922, more of Molly's face came away. Pieces of her inner ear, fragments of bone that her nurse had to carefully extract. The strange infection spread to her throat, and she developed severe pain when swallowing. Her jaw would bleed spontaneously, and nurses pressed white cotton bandages to her face, trying to stem the flow. On September 12, 1922, at 5 in the afternoon, the infection finally ate through Molly's jugular vein. Her mouth filled with blood faster than anyone could staunch it. Blood poured over her lips, down her face. She drowned in it. She was 24 years old. Her death certificate listed the cause as syphilis, a diagnosis that was completely false but convenient for her employer. The United States Radium Corporation would later use this lie to discredit Molly and the other women who became ill. Molly was not alone. By 1924, 50 women who had worked at the New Jersey plant were sick. A dozen were dead. They suffered from anemia, spontaneous fractures, bone tumors, and jaw decay. One woman's spine collapsed. Another developed a pelvic tumor larger than 2 footballs. The damaged bones glowed in the dark, visible through the skin. Some women realized they were poisoned only when they looked in mirrors at night and saw their skeletons shining through their flesh. The companies knew. In the early 1920s, the United States Radium Corporation commissioned Harvard physician Cecil Drinker to investigate the factory. His report concluded the lack of safety precautions was putting the women in mortal danger. The company buried this report. They submitted a falsified version to officials. They continued to insist radium was safe, even as their own chemists began dying. When the women sued, the companies fought with lawyers and manufactured evidence. They hired doctors and coached them to deny any connection between radium and illness. They claimed statutes of limitations had expired. They said the women were lying, suffering from syphilis or other diseases. The public, for a time, believed them. But slowly, the truth emerged. In 1925, pathologist Harrison Martland developed a test that proved conclusively the women were suffering from radium poisoning. The radioactive element was destroying their bodies from the inside, and there was no cure, no way to remove it from their bones. The women were dying, and everyone now knew why. Grace Fryer was one of the New Jersey dial painters who decided to fight. By 1927, when she finally found a lawyer willing to take her case, she could barely walk. Her spine was collapsing, her legs had shortened. She needed a back brace from neck to waist just to stand upright. 4 other women joined her lawsuit: Quinta McDonald, Edna Hussman, Albina Larice, and Catherine Schaub. They were called the Radium Girls, and their case became a national sensation. The women had perhaps 4 months to live when the lawsuit began. They appeared in court, these dying young women, and smiled for the photographers. It was a small act of defiance. They knew they would not survive to see justice, but they fought anyway for the women who came after them, for the principle that workers deserve protection from known dangers. The case settled out of court. Each woman received $10,000 and an annual pension of $600. None of them lived more than 2 years after the settlement. But their courage changed everything. In Illinois, the fight continued. Catherine Wolfe Donahue worked at the Radium Dial Company in Ottawa. By 1938, she had developed a grapefruit-sized tumor on her hip. Her teeth fell out. Her jawbone crumbled just as Molly Magia's had, and she held a handkerchief to her face constantly to absorb the pus that seeped from the wounds. She was dying, bedridden, when her case went to court. Against her doctor's advice, Catherine testified from her deathbed. Her lawyer, Leonard Grossman, worked for free. The Illinois Industrial Commission ruled in favor of Catherine and 14 other women. The company appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. The court declined to hear the case, letting the ruling stand. Catherine Wolfe Donahue died in July 1938 at 35 years old. Her legal victory came 3 months after her death. The legacy of the Radium Girls extends far beyond their individual tragedies. Their cases established the right of workers to sue corporations for workplace damages. They led to occupational safety standards and regulations. In 1949, Congress passed legislation granting workers compensation for occupational diseases. The field of health physics was shaped by knowledge gained from studying radium's effects on these women. Between 1917 and 1935, as many as 4,000 women worked as radium dial painters. We do not know how many died. Many deaths were misdiagnosed. The factories where they worked are now Superfund toxic waste sites, still contaminated a century later. What makes this story so disturbing is not just the suffering. It is the knowledge that the danger was known and deliberately hidden. The companies knew. The executives knew. They protected themselves while telling young women radium was safe, that the glow in their hair was nothing to fear. They valued profit over human life, and when the women began to die, they lied and fought to avoid responsibility. The Radium Girls were told they were working with liquid sunshine. Instead, they were handling death, invisible and patient, that settled into their bones and waited. They glowed in the dark, these ghost girls, not knowing that the light they carried was eating them from within. And when they understood what had been done to them, they fought with whatever strength remained, not for themselves, because they knew they were dying, but for others, for justice, for the principle that human lives matter more than corporate profits. Their names should be remembered: Molly Magia, Grace Fryer, Catherine Wolfe Donahue, Quinta MacDonald, Edna Hussman, Albina Larice, and Catherine Schaub, and hundreds of others whose names we do not know, who suffered and died in obscurity, whose bones still glow in their graves with the poison they were told was harmless. If this story has moved you, if you believe these women deserve to be remembered, I would be grateful if you would take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories from the darker corners of history waiting to be told, more voices that deserve to be heard. I will continue to bring them to you with the care and respect they require. Until next time, remember that the light we see is not always safe, and the promises we are given are not always true.